Well, hello and blessings to all the YouTube folk. Thanks for stopping by. This is Greg. Wanted to have a chat about food on the Appalachian Trail or long trails in general. And to put it in context, I wanted to discuss some trail math. Some years back, I think I turned 45 and realized my metabolism was maturing and slowing down. I woke up one morning and had 15 extra pounds, and the ops tempo of my activities was exactly the same. My caloric intake back in those days was about 4,000 calories a day. If I felt like stopping at a fast food place and having a cheeseburger, fries, a Coke, and a chocolate shake, I would do it. Frequently had lots of gravy, biscuits, bread, carbohydrates. And so one of my pilot friends, Bruce, suggested to me that him being 10 years ahead of me in the metabolism and age game, that I could reduce my caloric intake by half and probably knock those 15 pounds right off. And it's unbelievable to me that I could reduce my caloric intake by half. But I did cut it by 1,000 calories, cut out most of the fast food, processed food, much less carbohydrates. I was still doing about the same amount of hiking, surfing, sailing, climbing on mountains, and the 15 pounds fell right off. 7 or 8 years fast forward, my metabolism slowed down again, 15 pounds showed up again. And he reminded me that I could really do with cutting my caloric intake down by half. And again, it was nearly inconceivable to me that I could get away with that. But I dropped my calorie intake from 3,000 a day down to 1,500. And the 15 pounds fell right off. Recently now, on the near side of 60 at 50-something, 15 pounds showed up on me again. This metabolism and maturing thing, it's for the birds. And so I cut my caloric intake down to 1,000 calories a day. Carbohydrates are gone, processed food is gone, mostly red meat is gone. Can still eat my weight in sushi. Wow, no more ice cream. Wow. Lots of stuff is gone, and I still have 5 or 10 pounds, and I'm guessing I'm actually going to have to change how I live in order to get that off. My ops tempo for my activities had slowed down. I don't surf as much as I used to. I've traded sailboarding for kiteboarding. The days of climbing 7,000 and 8,000 meter peaks is mostly, I'm guessing, in my past, though I still like to hike on long trails. So the point being to that mathematical context is my intake of calories on a normal day these days is 1,000 calories. Okay, hang on to that bit. Now, the next part is that recently my wife and I upgraded our Apple products, and she got some fitness watch from the place that upgraded her iPhone to the 6 and her iPad. And she was telling me how that it charts how many steps she takes, her heart rate, how much she sleeps, whether the steps she took were on straight and level terrain or climbing and descending. So I asked her, well, what does your fitness watch say about calories versus steps? How does that work? And she says, well, it depends. If I'm climbing, there is maybe a 2-to-1 ratio of steps to calories. For example, 2,000 steps would equal burning 1,000 calories climbing. If she was on level ground, I think she said it was between a 3 and a 4-to-1 ratio, so 4,000 steps would equal 1,000 calories. I don't know whether if I wore her watch it would chart the same kind of numbers, but just splitting the difference and thinking now of the Appalachian Trail, not all of it is like Georgia and North Carolina that goes straight up and straight down for 2 states. But let's just imagine that splitting the difference, a 3-to-1 ratio of 3,000 steps would burn 1,000 calories. So hold on to that. My caloric intake is 1,000 calories a day. Let's hypothetically choose 3,000 steps burning 1,000 calories. And now let's think of the Appalachian Trail as 2,160 miles. If we break that up into days, let's think how to go there. Well, let's just talk about a pace count. In my nav case, my Ranger beads have a Sharpie mark at the top tab that says 17. And what that means is that 17 paces equal 100 feet. Or that 17, and a pace being every time my left foot goes forward, which I understand most normal people think is 2 steps. Or let's just think that 17 right, lefts equal 50 feet. Let's see, just so the math works. Let's choose the 50. If 17 is to 50, then 170 is to 500, and 1,700 is to 5,000, and there are 5,280 feet and some change in a mile. 200 feet would be 1734.68, and the balance, just call it 1,792 steps equal a mile. And because going up and down steep hills maybe has some smaller steps, why don't we round it to 1,800? For me, 1,800 steps then equals 1 mile. If we use our 3-to-1 ratio for Mary's Fitbit watch, then 1,800 steps would be 600 calories for a mile. The Appalachian Trail being 2,160 miles, if you divide that by 10, then you're on the trail for about 9 months. 10 miles would be 6,000 calories. 15-mile days would get us in that 4.5–5 month range. Gosh, and who has 9 months to hike the Appalachian Trail? 15 miles would be 9,000 calories a day. I can't even imagine eating 9,000 calories a day. Maybe Michael Phelps can, but I can't. My caloric intake is 1,000 calories a day. However, if you're going to tack on 15-mile days on the Appalachian Trail, the numbers are the numbers unless Mary's Fitbit ratios are way off the mark for going up and down. Maybe somebody who's out there who's really paying attention to Appalachian Trail nutrition can chime in on this. So in front on the table are the kinds of things I take with me on long hikes. And my typical loadout for a 5-day section weighs about 12 pounds and is about 6,000 calories a day. And that includes breakfasts, snacks before lunch, snacks after lunch, and supper. And so give me a minute here. Let me put this thing on pause, and I'll separate these out into the different times of day that they're consumable, and we'll talk about what a daily loadout for meals and snacks would look like. Hang on just a second. Okay, here's breakfast. In 1969, when I was on the Appalachian Trail with my grandfather, breakfast was almost exclusively Pop-Tarts and Quaker Instant oatmeal. We would occasionally put raisins in it. We carried sugar, cinnamon sugar with us to add to the calories and the flavor of the oatmeal. But day after day, mostly breakfast was Pop-Tarts and oatmeal. When we would frequent to come into towns for resupply, we rarely, never in fact, stayed in a hostel or a hotel, and we never ate in restaurants, but we would occasion to pick up things to bring back out on the trail. We might come start our laundry and then go shopping. We discovered that if we bought a dozen eggs, and they had the more robust cardboard containers back in those days, 50 years ago, we would hard boil in my Scout cook set hard boil 6 of the eggs. And for 3 mornings, we would each have an egg, and we would get a pound of bacon and fry it in our Scout cook pan, blot it up as well as we could with paper towels, and put the hard-boiled eggs in their shells in baggies. And this was pre-Ziploc. What were those things? They actually worked pretty well, I think. They had a top that would fold over inside the bag, and then another arrangement where you could fold the outside flap over, and it would keep things pretty fresh. So we would put 2 eggs and 2 slices of bacon in a bag, and for a couple of days, or at the end of our week, they would still be good. The bacon, surprisingly, does not go bad once it's cooked, especially salted bacon. We would tuck it away in a part of our pack that was out of the sun and in the coolest part. And before we ate it, if it looked sketchy, we would just not eat it. Or we would put it in the little cook pan and heat it up and fry all the microbes off of it. And it's actually pretty hard to get food poisoning from food that isn't fresh. Once your pituitary gland reads that you swallowed protein, it dials up production of stomach acid, which is fairly low molarity hydrochloric acid with a pH of around 2. And if you, say, ate a piece of roasted chicken and then tried to swallow a penny, you would probably never pass it, because the low molarity hydrochloric acid in the stomach would dissolve it, and it would never see the outside world again through the digestive tube, which is probably more information than you wanted to have today. The half dozen eggs that we did not hard boil, we would keep. Usually he would keep them because he didn't trust me not to put my backpack down on a rock and break them. But for the next couple of days of our trail, we would cook 2 eggs. Sometimes we would also have Canadian bacon, or if we could find some country ham. Country ham being, well, in the South everybody knows what it is. Oh, I know what it is. If you've ever been to Hardee's, the ham biscuit with that slab of salted ham is country ham, and it just doesn't go bad. So if we found country ham, we would pack that up in baggies and heat it up with our fresh eggs. And so to have some variety on a couple of the mornings before we had to ultimately revert to Pop-Tarts and oatmeal, we could have eggs and bacon, or eggs and country ham, or eggs and Canadian bacon, and that kind of thing. We also discovered that the Carnation instant breakfast had most of the stuff that you need to keep you going and a pile of calories. Problem is that the directions call for it to be made with milk, and we didn't carry milk on the Appalachian Trail, but there was Carnation powdered milk, as there is now. Back in those days, it wasn't skim milk or low fat. It was just dehydrated whole vitamin D milk. And so we would take some powdered milk, Carnation instant breakfast, a package of, oh, I can see the package, I can't remember it. The Whole Earth store sold this stuff back in the hippie days of the 60s and 70s, but it was powdered protein. We would mix powdered protein with the Carnation instant breakfast and the powdered milk, and leave our canteens in a stream overnight and mix cold water with it and have a very tasty chocolate milk glass. We even took those, gosh, I can see him now on Duck Dynasty. It was Uncle Si that had one of those things for his iced tea. Who made them? Tupperware made them. And we would pack away a Tupperware glass and a long spoon and our stuff, and that would hold enough cold water to make us a nice tall glass of milk, instant breakfast with some protein powder in it. And you could really tell whether you started your morning that way with that much protein, especially in the hill country in the Carolinas. So also in the modern day, there are all kinds of backpackers pantry and mountain house meal that you can heat water and put it in there and rehydrate stuff. We did also carry a stick of butter, later on a tub of margarine. We found that small tubs of margarine would not go bad in a week. no matter what the temperature was, even in the summer. And we would take a jar of grape jelly or strawberry preserves and some small sandwich rounds so that we could have buttered toast and jam in the morning if we wanted to, just to add to the variety of the stuff that we were consuming. Most days, though, if it was a long time between resupply, I remember when we hiked the John Muir Trail in 1971, you couldn't get a resupply at the ranger station midway. And you can do the John Muir Trail in about 7 days, but we like to stop and smell roses. And so we were taking 15 days, and that meant we were packing 15 days of food. And by the end, we ran out of our eggs and Canadian bacon and country ham pretty quick. We still had plenty of instant breakfast, Pop-Tarts, and instant oatmeal. We would occasionally, too, to use our sandwich rounds till we ran out of them, with some Laughing Cow cheese or some block cheddar cheese and the country ham to make kind of breakfast sandwiches, the precursor maybe of an Egg McMuffin or something on the trail, and can still do those kinds of things today. So this collection here are the kinds of things that I do for breakfast on the Appalachian Trail, and usually I'm packing very carefully using the AWOL AT guide for the Appalachian Trail, or the online site for the PCT, or wherever it is I'm hiking. We're planning very specifically in between gaps and resupplies, usually never planning on carrying more than 5 days worth of food. Any more than that is more weight than I want to carry. And on the Appalachian Trail, there are just too many places to stop. And if there's a Walmart or a Dollar General or some kind of grocery store, gee, even along the AT now, most gas stations have the kinds of things that you would need to resupply for your meal structure. So let me pause this for a second, and then I'll grab out the kinds of things I do for snacks on the Appalachian Trail. Here are some of the things that are typically in my snack bag on the trail, and snack meaning after breakfast, before lunch, after lunch, before making camp. And it can vary from day to day. Almost every day in the morning in a Ziploc bag, I put a combination of roasted almonds, combos, those cheese-filled, pretzel-y tasting things, some corn nuts, and either traditional jelly beans or these sweet tart versions of jelly beans. And I'll throw them in there and mix them all up, and it doesn't matter. The almonds and cheese in the combos provide some protein and salt. The carbohydrates in the combos and the corn nuts just give you energy, and the jelly beans or the sweet tart things just dump raw sugar on you that you need. I had seen young people on the Appalachian Trail with flour tortillas or sandwich rounds, dipping them into a plastic tub of vanilla cake icing and eating that, and I couldn't fault them because they were doing 20-something mile days to my 10 to 15. But as a thinking person of science, you need both protein and calories in order to survive expending the caloric load that you do walking up and down trails on the Appalachian Trail. And just a word about that. If your calorie intake is like mine, say between 1,000 and 2,000 calories a day, and you go hiking on the Appalachian Trail, don't expect that you will either have the appetite or the intestinal fortitude to ramp yourself up to 6,000 to 9,000 calories in order to provide ample nutrition for yourself. It won't happen. One year in Haiti, we cleared a paddock of 2.5 acres, planted it with alfalfa, and put our Boer dairy goats and Nubian goats each in their paddocks with new alfalfa fodder crops, and they immediately all got sick. They were not used to consuming that much protein, and the result was diarrhea and sickness, and it took easing them into the paddock for an hour or so a day over the course of a month and a half or 2 months before their metabolisms finally got used to having that much protein. So cannot just change your diet without your digestive system reacting and probably rejecting it. In addition to the Ziploc bag with almonds and combos and jelly beans and corn nuts, I will usually have a Cliff Bar of some kind. They're a bunch of tasty ones. They have tons of calories. I think these are about 250, 260. From way back in the day in the 60s, we had Payday candy bars and Snickers, and they were a combination of caramel and peanuts and sugar, and in the case of the Snickers, chocolate. And then I always have in my belt pouch a Ziploc bag with some jerky in it of some kind, and maybe some Laughing Cow cheese. And those will be the snacks, or some crackers that I carry with me during the course of the day. Let me get these cleared off and stuffed back in my bear bag there behind, and we'll fish out some things that were the kinds of things 50 years ago and are the kinds of things in the modern age that I do for lunch. Okay, hang on again. Here's the stuff that usually winds up in my lunch bag. Understood that lunch is usually just a resting stop on the trail. Cook stove is not coming out until camp is made. The kinds of things that work very easily for lunch are Triscuits or wheat thins with a slab of cheese off a block, or a Laughing Cow cheese and a slice of summer sausage. Can also add cheese and summer sausage to the sandwich rounds that are, I don't know how to describe them. They're not so much a piece of bread as they are a sleeve, kind of thing you'd find maybe in a Mediterranean restaurant, but just about the right size to fit easily in a cook pot if you wanted to store them over there. For lunch, I'll usually have a piece of fruit or some raisins. The sandwich thins also work well with peanut butter and jelly. Recently, a friend of mine gave me this jar of Reese's peanut butter. He observed on the Appalachian Trail, on the section from Fontana Dam northward into the Smokies, that I had rejected in principle the taste of Nutella, which I think is, where does that stuff come from? Hazelnut, maybe? I'm not sure. This Reese's stuff tastes like eating a Reese's Buttercup, only it has the texture of peanut butter. And with that and some Welch's grape jelly and a sandwich round, lots of calories, lots of sugar. Over on the left, I have some emergency. A year or two ago, I was on a search and rescue in South Florida. Pretty sure we found the aircraft the night before with infrared equipment. Put a ground team on it first thing the next morning. Found the airplane in 15 minutes. With the withdrawal of some of the administration's stimulus money to law enforcement, it took all day before one of the local law enforcement agencies, I think ultimately the Highway Patrol, assumed jurisdiction of the crash site. And by the time I got home, it was late. Utilities are nasty. And when I'm changing out, I discover that I had a tick on the back of my left knee. I dispatched him with a match. Didn't think about him at all until a year later when we were, where were we? Oh, we were looking for that little autistic girl that got lost in the national forest up in Georgia. And got a call for the Red Cat 7 or 8 in the evening, got there by 9. Walked up and down some of the trails where she got separated from her parents, was hesitant to go tromping around with a ground team because our canine guy was coming either that night or in the morning, and tried infrared equipment and directional microphones, couldn't see anything, couldn't hear her. Turns out our canine guy found her in 5 minutes in the morning, but my tent mate that night from South Florida pointed to the back of my left knee and asked me how long I had Lyme disease, and I shared with him, I don't have no Lyme disease. And he says, yeah, that red bullseye on the back of your leg is Lyme disease. When did you get bit by a tick? I told him, I didn't get bit by a tick a year ago. And he said, Colonel, you can't let that kind of stuff go. You could have chronic issues that are really persistent and haven't you had symptoms? And I said, no, I hadn't had any symptoms. So what are the symptoms? And he says, chronic pain, lethargy, fatigue, pain in the joints, headaches, light sensitivity. And I thought, well, I've had some of all of those, but I thought it was because I was nearing 60 and hike on long trails. But the long and short was I got rolled over with Lyme disease, and ultimately went through a doctor or two, firing some, finally finding a specialist that knew what we were dealing with, and started treating it with ridiculous doses of doxycycline and then ciprofloxacin, and began hyperhydrating. I usually drink a lot, between 3 and 4 liters a day. I bumped that up to 6 liters and ultimately to 8 liters a day, and then discovered that drinking that much water, though I was hyperhydrating, I was dehydrated where my electrolytes were concerned. So every other liter I would dose liberally with Emergency, which has a bunch of electrolytes and vitamin C, and every other liter with Pedialyte or Gatorade mix, so that whatever I was drinking, I was adding electrolytes. And so at lunch, I intention to swallow down a liter of something with either Pedialyte in it or Emergency. The Emergency tastes kind of like a tangerine, maybe, closest I can think. So anywho, these are the kinds of things that work very well for lunch. The lightest weight version would be a sandwich rounds with some Laughing Cow cheese or block cheese and the summer sausage. So let me clear this out and throw it in the food bag, in the bear bag, and then I'll bring out the wide array of kinds of things that are available for camp cooking at night for your final meal, and why I tend to eat heavy, especially for that meal. Hang on again. Okay, last piece to this. I should probably have done it in multiple videos. Oh well, I'm still figuring this out. On the far left is my original bear bag, which is a stainless steel bag with a Velcro enclosure. It's absolutely raccoon, mouse proof, everything proof. However, it weighs almost 20 times as much as my Z-Packs bear bag, which is over on the right. Whichever one I've used, I do always employ those bomb-proof Ziploc bags that are designed for hikers so that the no odors escape. And I have, as a practical experiment in the Adirondacks, set my mesh bear bag with the food in the Ziploc bag just out on the ground on a picnic table in front of where I was hiking. And in that part of the Adirondacks, I had traditionally switched to a bear canister because the bears are really smart in upstate New York. They know how to climb a tree and mess with a limb, and I've seen bears shake loose bear poles to get food. They're just really clever. New York bears, go figure. But in the modern age, my bear bag is by Z-Packs. It weighs a fraction, minuscule fraction of what my stainless steel one weighs, and I have never had bears get into it. And at approaching 60, shaving grams and ounces off makes me happier at the end of my day. Over on the left in the back is the famous or infamous, perhaps, Kraft macaroni and cheese. When I was a kid 50 years ago, we would travel with packages of this, my grandpa and I, and cans of tuna fish. And every night for supper, except right after resupply days in town, we would have macaroni and cheese and tuna fish. We called it tuna mac. And, it's a lot of calories. We would have 2 bags of them apiece and a whole can of tuna apiece. At night, especially when it was cold, we would try and have our final meal be kind of heavy. We found that metabolically, we were warmer at night after having had a heavier meal. We would occasion to have canned Spam, and cook that in the fry pan and throw it in there in lieu of tuna fish just to have some variety. We would take a variety of different spices to throw in there to just mix it up a little bit. In the modern age, though, there's a million different things you can do. Besides the Mountain House and Backpacker's Pantry, there are at least a half a dozen that I recall off the top of my head, cottage industries that have made a business out of preparing dehydrated meals for hikers, and some of them are really incredible and pretty affordable. At our house, a dehydrator makes it possible for us to choose the things that we like the most, cook them, put them out on wax paper, chop them up so they dehydrate evenly in the dehydrator, and construct our own in heavy freezer bags. For the Mountain House meals, I will typically snip off the top, take them out of their bags, and put them in a freezer bag that fits a little Reflectix cozy that I made with Gorilla Tape. There's a bunch of people online that have versions of making a rehydrating cozy for your pack meals, and I'll look around and maybe see can I add some links to this if I can figure out how to do that. In the back on the right, to the right of the Mountain House meal, Nor makes half a dozen different rice sides and pasta sides that rehydrate pretty quickly. You have to cook them a little longer than just letting them sit. In the middle is some powdered potatoes. Sometimes what I will do is add, oh, you know what I don't have here? I was just thinking about it. I don't have any of the ramen noodles, the backpacker meal of the century. A package of ramen noodles and some rehydrated potatoes make an interesting combination, and you can throw some Spam in there, or any of these Starkist or Chicken of the Sea pouches. If you look in the front, there are a couple of companies, Tyson and some others, that make pouched chicken that easily last 10 or 12 days, indefinitely, I would guess. Smoked salmon, various flavors of tuna that can be attended with the various pasta and rice sides to add protein. In the middle there's some Campbell's products that are, you just heat them up. Marsala mushroom, Bombay potatoes, some ready meals. There are a lot of those things you can have in the grocery store. The problem with those in that middle row is that they do not require rehydration. So they're heavy with water, and you can carry them if you want to. If I was doing a weekender, I might take them just for a treat, because some of them are really good and make a nice respite from Mountain House and the Nor pasta and rice sides. But for long trails, I would never take those things. They're just way too heavy. The rehydrated kind of meals are the way to go. Similarly, the chili, the two different versions of it are really good. For a short section, I might grab some of that in a resupply and eat it on the first night to get a lot of the weight out of my pack quick. They do have their place. One of the other things that my grandfather and I did when we had resupplied is we might go to the meat market of the grocery store and buy some fresh boneless chicken or steak. And since we weren't staying in hostels, and we were definitely not staying in hotels, and we were never eating out, we would spend the money on steak, bring it back to camp, and cook it. We did have a little small grill. I've still got it around here somewhere. I don't carry it with my ultralight gear because it just, wow, every ounce adds up. But we would cook a steak. Some of the state parks in Florida intersect the Florida Scenic Trail, so you can come into there, and even in the primitive section that has no showers and no electricity, they usually have a fire ring with a grill. So point being is that on the day or two following our resupply, we would have fresh meat. If we called ahead, we could get the butcher to cut some of it and freeze it, And then by the second night, our frozen steak would be thawing out so that we could cook it on the grill. And then we would go back to our tuna mac and cheese and our less tasty stuff. Um, the parts of the trail that are the most finicky, 100-mile wilderness up near Maine. Wow, you got to think, 100 miles, 5 days, lots of food. The John Muir Trail, only now on the John Muir you can resupply at the ranger station halfway, so it's much, much easier than it was. Parts of the desert in California where it's just a long way between water. You also have to be careful with your food that's a rehydrated commodity. So in summary, wow, what were the numbers? I usually take in 1,000 calories a day. On a 15-mile day, that's almost 18,000 times 15 steps, which is between 6,000 and 9,000 calories. I really cannot consume 9,000 calories. And even for, say, a 5-day loadout, I'm usually planning on 6,000 calories a day between breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, and a heavier supper. And I have never not come into a resupply on the far side of 5 days without things left over. But these are the kinds of things that I take. 50 years ago, there were much fewer options of the kinds of things you could take. Now there are huge options. The last time we did a section from Harper's Ferry to Katahdin, I gave up sending resupply boxes. There were too many places where you could get food. When you think of what is the cost of those mail boxes you can get from the U.S. Postal Service, maybe $19, and they'll send it anywhere. When you figure in the $19, gosh, especially if you come in on a weekend in some of these rural places where they're closing post offices for the weekend and you have to stay in a hostel or a hotel, whatever savings you had by sending your supply box ahead, you have just lost by not hitting the schedule of when the post office box is open. So in the modern age, I don't do supply boxes nearly at all. For some of the things that I really do as a treat, I'll have my family send me one in the middle of several weeks just for fun. But out of necessity, you don't need to. Everything you need is at a Dollar General or Walmart or some grocery store in a town, and especially on the Appalachian Trail. Wasn't nearly so much on the Pacific Crest Trail and the Continental Divide, especially from Glacier National south. When you're in the park, there are no places, so it might be handy in those scenarios. But on the Appalachian Trail, there are too many places to get really good food. Anything else in there? Did I miss? Oh, yeah. In the middle row on those meals that don't require hydration, there's some little packages of mild sauce and salsa from Taco Bell. There's some various seasoning packages from Chick-fil-A and some from one of our local family-owned barbecue places here in Florida. You can throw those in your pack to add great variety to your normal stuff when you're on the trail on long sections. And so these are the things, these are the things I take, and maybe on another video I'll just put together a day's worth of food and we'll go out on the trail, cook breakfast, hike, have a snack, have lunch, hike, have a snack, make camp, eat the final meal, and you can see me doze off in my comfortable ultralight hammock at the end of our day. I'm going to put this together as one. Gosh, I hope it's not too long. Hope I can figure it out. If I do, my family will think I'm a genius. But thanks so much for stopping by. If you have input, I always love to hear comments and kinds of things that you're taking on the trail. And stop by and say hello and tell me where you're from. And take care of yourself till I see you the next time.